I'm frightened, downright frightened about
Hmm.
AI. If we let this go unfettered, there's a very good chance that 20 years from now, the next generation is going to be people who are not really capable of writing.
Again, thank you for your time. I would like to start with a little bit of background on you. I mean, if I saw your kind of resume right, you got a lot going on. is, that, is that
Yeah,
fair?
that's accurate.
So yeah, so maybe a little intro on you. Who are you, and what are you doing? What are you about?
Sure. So I work for the State University of New
Mm,
York at New Paltz, which is a small town in the Hudson Valley region. And I'm in the psychology department as a professor, and I also direct our campus's Evolutionary Studies
mm,
program, which is interdisciplinary, so includes courses from a variety of departments. And we have a speaker series connected with that. We've had a lot of great evolution-based speakers on our campus since we started in about 2007. Um, I was the founding president of the Northeastern Evolutionary Psychology Society, which right now is really an international society.
mm.
Where we have our conference in Pittsburgh next week, and we regularly get people from 5 continents and more than half the states typically. So it was a very
That's super cool.
successful idea,
Mm.
which is not true of all my ideas,
Yeah.
but that was a good one. And I also do a lot of research. So I'm director of something called the New Paltz Evolutionary Psychology Lab.
Mm.
And I have a team of mostly undergraduate and graduate students. And we do research on pretty much anything and everything related to how we can use evolution to better understand the human
Mm.
experience and human behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And how many books? Four? Did I count them right?
I'm finishing my 10th
Oh
right
gosh, I
now,
was way off.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, on
okay.
your
And
bio on psychology today, I think they call out four specifically, but 10. Your
yeah,
10th book.
I should probably
What's this
update that.
latest one about? What's that?
Yeah, the newest one I'm pretty excited about. I'm co-editing this book with Andy Gallup, who's at Johns Hopkins, and Setu Karthikeyan, who's at Pace
Mm.
in New York City, and it is the Oxford Handbook of Evolutionary Psychology. We're just about done. It's going to have about 50 chapters and really just world-leading experts on various topics in the field, and we're just super excited about it.
Oh, super cool. Yeah. So I guess me saying you're a busy man is an understatement, but well, it's not,
Yeah, it's all good.
you must love it. I mean, it's at some point I imagine it's not work. If you must love it. I mean,
Yeah, I always tell people I love my
that's
job.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people say that, but I
absolutely.
don't know if a lot of them mean that. But if you truly mean
Yeah,
it, I mean, that's
right.
because you're not working, right? You're just in that flow state. You're actually intrinsically motivated to do the work. It's just there's nothing better than that. It's so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, but so as I was reading through some of your content, I was getting a little depressed. I'm not going to lie to you, like
Yeah,
just because I think, and I tend to the reason in fact the reason I originally reached out to you is I also love looking at everything through an evolutionary lens, because just when you try to understand how we think or what we do, it does feel like we're maladapted to this world. It really does. There's a gap there,
yeah.
evolutionary mismatch, and you really focus on that. So it really piqued my interest. So what originally caught my eye was, I think you had given, it was an old one again. This was back in 2018. So I didn't want to get your update on thoughts there, but you kind of listed,
Sure.
you listed, what was it for? Oh, five, just basic, uh, uh, five things that our biology is not optimized for. I think you listed processed food, porn, video games, iPhones, and the couch. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I don't think any thinking person would disagree with any of that. And that was written in 18. And I think time has only confirmed all your claims there. Um,
Hmm.
so, I mean, I guess on that note, any fresh thoughts on those categories, or are they just as damaging as you were thinking back in 18?
Yeah, good. So that's a good question. So you're citing an article I wrote for Psychology Today,
Yeah.
which is another facet of my work. I've written for Psych Today for about 13 years
Yeah.
now, and I'm coming upon my 10 millionth view. So hoping
We'll
my
push it
mom
over
and
the edge
others
here.
that yeah, exactly.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, I really enjoy writing for them because it it gives me an opportunity to reach a much broader audience than academic publishing.
It does certainly, yeah.
Um, yeah, the basic idea of evolutionary mismatch, which, as you pointed out, Vinny, is something that I focus on quite a bit, is the idea that when you take an organism and it suddenly, somewhat suddenly or abruptly finds itself in an environment which mismatches the environment that its ancestors evolved to adapt to, there's going to be
Mm,
problems. The simplest way to explain this to a little kid would be a fish out of water. That
right.
fish out of water dies, and that's because everything about it anticipates a fully aquatic life. And the respiration system was evolved for that. The skin, everything about a fish evolved for that. Same reason that you couldn't plant a palm tree in my backyard in upstate New
Right.
York. There's a 100% chance it's not going to make it through a winter like what
Mm,
we just had, as an example. So mismatch is something that really can be understood across species as part of the broader evolution of life. When we look at humans, and I think to me this is one of the great insights of modern evolutionary psychology. When we look at humans from this lens, we suddenly see that in a lot of ways we are like the fish that hopped out of the fishbowl, or we are the palm tree that's been planted in upstate New
mm,
York. And what's interesting i- about it partly is you don't realize it. So this field of inquiry has been fantastic at getting people to realize something that's been in front of our noses the entire time. Um, we, like all organisms, we evolved to be lazy, to expend as little
conserve
energy as
calories, yeah.
possible,
Survival, yeah.
conserve
Yeah.
calories. This is why you don't see, when you see my wife and I have a bird feeder and we watch the birds regularly, and you never see a bird just flying laps over the house just to build
Yeah,
muscle.
right. That's
Uh,
right. That's a good
you
point.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
they fly, they're in good shape, they fly to the feeder, they hide from predators, they do what all animals do. Humans, because we have developed such extraordinary technological skills, um, we've we've ended up really in a lot of ways hurting ourselves unwittingly.
Mm,
So before 10,000 years ago, when agriculture burst on the scene, um, all humans were nomads. And so to understand our ancestral conditions, a lot of people in my field will look at nomads and kind of ask the question, well, what do nomads do? What are their lives like? They live outside. They exercise every single day, so they don't have to join the gym.
right.
Um, they're constantly working on food. The only food they have is natural food. There's no such thing as processed food, food that comes in a bag, this kind of thing, or chips or whatever. So you don't tend to see a lot of nomadic people that are overweight. You don't tend to see type 2 diabetes. There's various immunological disorders that you don't tend to see. There's various cardiovascular disorders that you don't tend to see. Now it's a trade-off. They also don't have modern medicine, so there's things that they're more likely to die from than us. But the converse is true
Mm,
too, and I think people are kind of surprised by that. We call those diseases of civilization.
mm,
Um, we can easily sit on our couch, go to the kitchen and eat some really unhealthy, yummy, processed meal, like order a pizza for $15 and share that with the family, follow that up with ice cream, sit on the couch for another several hours, and then lay in your comfy bed for 9 hours, and
right.
then,
And
maybe go to
no animal's going
work.
to break in and eat you, and you don't have to run away from it. It's like, right,
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that's evolutionary mismatch. And so I say that those things that I cited in that 2018 piece, they definitely, I'd say they remain. And
Mm,
that was 8 years ago. As I've advanced in my research on this topic, it's you just find more and more instances of mismatch, and I gotta say, doing research in this field is almost like taking candy from a baby because you almost not in every single case, but you almost always find if you're looking at a new instance of mismatch that no one's ever studied before, you almost always find the same kinds of problems. Our minds aren't evolved for that. We're
mm,
not good at doing that. It causes problems of one kind or another. One example that I know you reached out to me about in one of your communications has to do with education.
yeah, it's a big one.
Um, yeah, and so, here in the United States and in most industrialized countries, we send our kids to public schools or in some case private schools that in many ways parallel public schools. Um, there are so many mismatches in our educational
Mm,
systems, and they include the fact that, and we know this largely from the work of Peter Gray, who's at Boston College and has been there for a long time, studies learning in nomadic societies around the globe, and then kind of takes a look at what are things like here
mm,
and finds mismatches such as in nomadic societies, regardless of where you are, kids play and they play all day and they play in mixed age groups, and there's rarely an adult to be found.
mm,
Um, and that seems to be the most common form of learning. And they learn from each other through the play process. They learn how to do whatever is normative in their particular culture. The idea of sitting down all day or 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day with 30 other kids that are exactly your same age. Three of them you've ever met before, but because they shuffle kids around, 27 you've never met before. There's some 30-year-old adult lady in the front whom you've never met, and
mm,
this person's teaching you a bunch of what we call secondary knowledge. So, secondary knowledge is like learning about how things work instead of actually doing things. So you can throw a ball 100 times and learn the best way to get a good trajectory, to get a good arc, to get good speed.
mm.
Or you can take a class on the physics of projectiles and understand it at that level.
Right, right,
Nomads
right.
only learn that primary level,
Mm,
whereas we focus very much on secondary knowledge.
mm,
There's a devaluation of outside time. There's a devaluation of social kinds of experiences with a bigger focus on academics. Classes start early. The circadian rhythm of middle school kids and high school kids naturally is not to get up at 6:30 to get on a bus at
mm,
7:15, like is so common. Um, so those mismatches have a lot of consequences. And in the most recent piece that I wrote, that I know that you
yeah.
cited in our correspondence, the single most disturbing finding that I've read and come into is that during the school year, adolescents who are prone towards suicidal ideation,
Mm,
that ideation is significantly larger during the school year than it is during summer, than it is during winter break. This is what we call correlational research, so we can't exactly say the one causes the other, but it
it's
sure
correlated.
seems
Yeah,
like, yeah, they're correlated,
yeah,
and that would be a kind of wild coincidence to not have some relationship.
yeah. That was yeah. I did see that. That was a little disturbing. I mean, and uh, yeah, you always see that, and you hear it a lot. But oh, your kid can't sit still. They can't pay attention.
Hmm.
So now you put them on a drug. It's like the because you said something that was interesting. About our nomadic ancestors were healthier, but also they died of things that maybe today current medicine would fix. But we live
Right.
longer, but we're also giving ourselves new diseases, and then we invent new medications for those diseases. So it's just kind of this push
Yeah.
pull thing. And that is
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. But the suicide thing, that was just, yeah, it was heartbreaking to
right.
and what do you think I mean, I don't know if I don't know anything about these studies, but the suicidal ideations, is the cause just, is it more based around the social anxiety and and the and that part of it? Is it mostly more young women than young men? Is there some date like,
It it seems to be. I mean, there's some standard findings that women of all ages who lean towards suicidal ideation tend to experience that more than biological males, whereas males are more likely to act on it. That's kind of a
oh,
renowned finding across sort of across the board. So really, really, as someone who's a parent, someone who teaches, late teenage kids, these statistics, these findings really are just really hurtful and difficult to think about. There's a lot of research showing that there's tons of social anxiety in the schools, and this seems to be on the increase,
mm,
interestingly. And as you pointed out in one of your emails, Jonathan Haidt's new book about the anxious generation, or titled that,
yeah,
um, he really blames the cell phones, very explicitly, and it's a very data rich book. In fact, he gave a draft of that book to myself and to several of my students. He wanted student perspectives on some of the things he was saying, and they largely agreed with his what he was
mm,
saying, which was really interesting because he's kind of saying, you guys are so leaning on these technologies that they have short-term benefits, but they have long-term adverse
mm,
consequences. And whenever there's anything like that, humans are, we stink at those kinds of situations. We love, like any organism, we love taking the short-term
right,
gain, and it's hard for us to not take the short-term gain because we know there's some kind of long-term adverse consequence.
right,
So if I check my phone and I see, oh wow, that person that I really admire just liked my Facebook thing, that's really exciting. And then okay, and then I pick up my phone a minute later, and then suddenly I'm in trouble in school, and then suddenly my parents are mad at me, and suddenly the other kids are saying, "What's the matter with you? You don't have the impulse control that you need." And um, it's a really slippery slope. I think technology, especially communication
mm,
technologies that are so evolutionarily mismatched, provide so many slippery slopes. And as technology advances, to the extent that leaders in the field of communication technology are not evolutionarily educated, I think there's just going to be more and more problems.
well, I would actually say, and this is actually, I think, sadder. I mean, I'm in software, not in the specific, ways that I think you're talking about here, but I would actually say I know for a fact these software developers, the Facebooks, the Twitters, or X now, whatever, all these platforms, actually, the software engineers work with psychology. They have psychology teams
Hmm.
because they know what's the most dopaminergic, what's
Yeah,
going to get that dopamine hit the quickest, how they shape every
right.
little color, every sound. And that's, so it's actually more malevolent,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because they want you on the platforms. And it is
Yep.
no accident that it's addicting. I mean, it's everything about it. It's really, it,
Yeah.
it, I talk, my wife and I talk this all the time, and we're certainly not alone, but it's like, it's really hard as a parent to shield that from your kids. I mean, we thought, before we had
Absolutely.
kids, and ours are 10 and 12 now, we're like, oh yeah, we won't let that stuff happen. And yeah, right. Yeah, right. Okay.
Right.
Just with all
Exactly.
friends and peer pressure. And it's I mean, that device is so darn addicting. I mean, I'm addicted to it, and I
Yep.
find myself. But I'm an adult, and I can be
Yeah.
like, okay, I grew up in born in the '70s, grew up in the '80s, so my brain didn't have to go through that, as it was developing. Thank God. But yeah, it's a real thing, and it's now the so that unfortunately just put a closure on that. Yeah, I think it's not only that they don't. I would say they don't understand the psychology behind it. I think, and I mean, you may know different. I think they actually do, and they use that to their
Yeah.
advantage, which is even worse than them not knowing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the only thing that I would add to that, because I do agree with you, and there was that famous Netflix
Social Dilemma, yeah,
documentary
Social
about that.
Dilemma,
Yeah, I
fantastic.
mean,
Yep.
yeah, they documented that really, really well, and you can only, and I do know a couple of PhD psychologists who are in the employ of Facebook and Instagram, and some of these companies, and
Yeah.
that's exact their job is to make this stuff more clickable,
Yeah, I agree.
more
Mm,
more addicting. The one thing that I would say is that there's a difference between behavioral science and evolutionary behavioral science. Subtle
mm,
distinction, but with evolutionary behavioral science, having a focus on let's not just understand how the mind works, but let's step back and think about why it evolved to be this way
mm,
in the first place. And this evolutionary mismatch angle on the technology is a bit different
mm.
than the more myopic angle of, well, you understand how to get
Of
people
just
to
the
engage in this
behavioral science of it.
behavior.
Okay, a good
Right.
distinction.
So
I appreciate that. Okay.
yeah, so I think that's something that,
Mm,
maybe these companies that are hiring these behavioral science teams, maybe they could go out of their way to include people with good educations and evolution as it relates to behavior as a good faith way to say, let's make this stuff so it doesn't mismatch our minds so much that we're just causing chaos.
yeah, the unfortunate reality is if it's going to in any way detract from profits, then good luck.
Hmm.
Good luck. Just good luck. Stock price.
Exactly.
I mean, we're it's
Yeah.
just and I'm a I appreciate capitalism, but it's got some downsides. And when it's all for
Yeah, I
profit,
agree.
and because you mentioned we talked about processed food earlier. I mean, food for profit is a. I mean, let's be honest. Food is freaking delicious in 2026. I can get
Yeah.
calories anywhere. It's super fast, super cheap, and man, they've hacked every palate, every sensor in my tongue. It's wonderful. So it's like it's like a personal responsibility. We have to like take it upon ourselves. Be like, okay, I got to go exercise. I got to try to eat some
Yep.
whole foods. I got to move more.
Yep.
I got to put down the phone. I got to stop looking at porn. Like all the stuff that you mentioned, but it's not an automatic thing in this world. You have to actively be thinking, I shouldn't do
Yeah.
most of these things that are so easy in front of me. And it's like, man, so it's it takes it's quite active of a solution. It's just not if you just do what feels natural, you'll get into some trouble.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. There's a concept called supernormal stimulus, and a
mm,
supernormal stimulus
like that.
is something that an organism evolved to respond to, and usually by human interference. There's a version of that stimulus that amplifies whatever is stimulating about that.
Mm,
So there's a classic example of the herring gull has this red mark on its beak, and that is something that the chicks who are just brand new and just hatched, that when they see that they go straight toward the red mark. Their vision's not
mm,
fully great yet, but they can see that red mark. Well, if you take a pencil and put a red mark on it, they'll start going after that pencil. And if you make the red mark bigger, they go after it even more.
mm,
And there's no food, it's just a pencil. So supernormal stimuli have been documented in a lot. You can do that with lots of different species. You can mess around with them, look what they evolved to
yeah.
respond to, and amplify those features. But in humans, pizza is supernormal stimulus. Birthday cake
Yeah.
is a supernormal stimulus. It's it's hard to not gravitate toward those. Just like you're saying, Vinny, it's like, dang, I have to make myself
Right.
not eat that extra cookie or make myself go on this 4 mile run up this hill or whatever it is that
Yeah.
you're doing. We've created this world where there's supernormal stimuli all over the place. One example I like to give to my students, and you'll appreciate this as a dad, is when you throw a little kid a birthday party, which sounds like you've probably done
Oh yeah.
several
Yep.
times. It's always fun, and you always put out the food, and there's the chips and the pretzels and the chocolates and whatever. and there's someone, usually her name is Mom, who puts out the grapes or something, fruit salad or something like
Yep.
that. And when you're cleaning up at the end of the party,
That's right. I know where
it's
you're
the
going.
fruit. You put it in Tupperware, it goes in the fridge, and then 3 weeks later you throw it
Yep.
out,
Yep.
or however it lands. Um, but the irony of that is that grapes that you can get from Hannaford or whatever store you go to for your shopping in this day and age are cultivated such that they're sweeter than pretty much any food that any human ever would have had
Mm,
before the advent of agriculture. And it now is the thing that doesn't even barely get touched during the birthday party because we've created all these super normal stimuli kinds of foods and brownies and
right.
cookies and
Right.
and and
Yeah, I
all
always
that. So,
picture our ancestors just coming upon like a fruit tree, whatever it was, or grapes or something. I
mhm,
mean, their minds, how exciting and delicious and amazing might
yeah,
that have been? Maybe they haven't eaten in 5 days, and they had
right.
some meat 3 days ago or whatever. And yeah, and I do think about that often. And now it's like like you said, and put that in the fridge. It's gross. Um,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
that is pretty depressing to think about. Now,
yeah,
what are your thoughts on, well, because the school system, your blog on the education, that is a little, well, I guess on that, just to tie that one up, it, are there are there some systems that are addressing what this mismatch in the school systems? Are there, like, I hear Montessori, there's
sure.
some other things out there
Yeah,
that I don't know how effective they
yeah,
are, or
yeah. It's a great question. It's a great follow-up to that topic. So one of my students, Mariah Griffin, who's now in a PhD program at Virginia studying Montessori
mm,
from an evolutionary mismatch perspective, has found, and she found in her master's thesis working with me exactly that kids in Montessori compared to a match, what we call a match sample. So they weren't experimentally manipulated into these groups, but they were similar kinds of kids in
yeah,
a similar region. Some went to the public school, some are going to this Montessori school. Um, Largely in terms of social, emotional kinds of outcomes, there were benefits to the Montessori. There were a few cognitive academic outcomes. Also, the points went to the Montessori, and in no case was it the other way around.
interesting,
And the Montessori system is partly based, or at least it partly looks like an evolutionarily natural kind of learning. Certainly, it's much more hands-on, it's much more student directed, it's much more project oriented. Um, the probably the most classic example in the literature, and it's kind of by happenstance why this is the case, but it's something called the Sudbury schools. And so in Sudbury, Massachusetts, was the first of the Sudbury
hmm,
schools. The Sudbury schools are, and we have one here in the Hudson Valley, New York, so I know some of the kids that have gone to it. It's really interesting. It's completely alternative. It's completely student directed. They don't use the word teacher. There's a couple of younger adults who are in the room that will help you do something. So if you go in there and you want to build a rocket ship and you want to get some other 8-year-olds or other kids in your class, and we're going to make a rocket ship, that person will help get you the materials, help organize things, and so forth. Tomorrow, if you want to go out into nature and just play with bugs, that person will sort of help and teach a little bit
hmm,
about that experience. It's mixed age, it's kindergarten through 12th grade in the same room kind of thing. And what's been documented with Sudbury is not only does that seem to have social benefits and emotional benefits, which we would expect because it's reducing that
sure,
mismatch, but those kids do really well academically. They get into good
hmm,
schools. They tend to do well in college. They tend to do better on average than public school graduates in college. And I'll tell you, I think it's a great story about an example of how we can combat mismatch. But I once had a student, I was talking about this, and I never will forget this moment. Student raised her hand. She said, "How much does that Sudbury school cost?" And I'm like, huh, I never looked it up. My kids went to the public school. So we looked it up together as a class, and it was about ten to $12,000 a year per kid. So we did the math. If you have two kids, and it ends up being like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so the student, she wasn't being snarky, but this is New Paltz students are very, very progressive. And she said something that really shaped my thinking on this dramatically. She said, "Okay, so a non-evolutionarily mismatched education is essentially reserved for the wealthy." And I was like, wow, I never sort of thought about this at that bigger
Yeah, she's exactly
societal
right. Yeah.
level.
Just
Yeah,
like organic
yeah.
foods are reserved for the wealthy.
Yes.
And right,
Yep.
it's crazy to
Yep.
think, but we say organic food now, it means not poisonous food when everything just is
And
organic naturally, and we somehow tainted the whole
yeah,
system, and you got to go buy
e-
organic food.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So, but she's spot on. That's a
exactly.
great observation for her at that age. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought so. I thought it was a kind
Mm,
of brilliant idea. And you're exactly right. It translates to the foods that we eat. Um,
mm.
More than 60% of foods that people eat in America are processed foods. Um, I think we're among the world leaders on that one.
Yeah.
And exercise is another one where if you want to join the gym, gyms are not, they're not cheap. If you want access to outdoor resources, if you live in inner city without a car, good luck getting into the
Yeah.
mountains
Yeah. Yeah.
and on
Yeah.
the weekend, as an example. I've done some research on this where marathon runners, I happen to run several marathons. I didn't realize that it's like I'm privileged to be able to run marathons. Marathon runners make their average salaries about twice what the average American salary is. CrossFit gyms, which are modeled after evolutionarily typical kinds of
Yeah. I
movements
was addicted. I was
that
addicted
are,
for 10 years. Yeah.
man, I wanted to join it, and I was
Expensive.
like, oh my
It's
God, that
expensive.
it's
Yep.
expensive.
Yep.
It
It's no.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. You're right.
we
Oh yeah.
live in a world, it's so weird. We live in a world where there's so much mismatch, and the workarounds to reduce mismatch require it's America, so they require money.
Requires money. Yeah.
That's kind
Yeah.
of
Money gives you options. Unfortunately, the options are default, cheap, fast, whatever the for profit, status quo is, or I have money, so I'm going to pay for the thing that you're right, though. It is,
yep,
it's just, the irony is crazy. To get back to the default, you have to be, be of means to get to what was just basic and default that, going back. It's
exactly.
very, the irony. I never thought of it
Yeah.
that way. It's pretty ironic and sad, but yeah. Um, so, what are your thoughts on AI? So, the school systems, the evolutionary mismatch. We talked about social media. I'm, do you? I don't know. Maybe you haven't given this a ton of thought, but I'm assuming you have. But is with AI coming, is this just going to further our separation from? Is this going to just deepen the mismatch?
I, I will tell you, this is one of the most bifurcated
Yeah,
issues in the entire world.
going to save
And
humanity or destroy us, right?
yeah, I mean, and it totally depends who you ask. Um, as you probably can guess, and I know I've written a bit about this, I'm frightened,
Mm-hmm.
downright frightened about AI. My wife's a professional writer, and she was way ahead of the curve. And her company is all about future
Mm.
technologies and that kind of thing. So I was the first faculty member on my campus to know about AI and what was about to happen. This was maybe about 2, 3 years
Or
ago,
like the first
and
Chat
Shannon
GPT,
showed
whatever,
me
when it hit the street. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So my wife says, she says, "Oh my gosh," she says, "I just learned about this technology." She says, "Watch this," and she speaks into her phone or her computer, and it was write 2 paragraphs about the history of cars, the automobile, in the style of Glenn Geher.
Mm.
And it in 1 second had these 2 paragraphs written out, and it used phrases that I use, and it sounded to me like
Like
I
you.
had
Yeah.
written it. And I was like, this is, and that was just, and it only gets
It's
more
the
and
tip of
more
the iceberg.
advanced.
Yeah.
It's tip of the iceberg. In terms of education, it allows students to cut corners in a way that's totally unprecedented,
Mm.
and unfortunately, they are. There's all kinds of evidence saying that's not every student and it's not every assignment, but the the number of students who are leaning on AI and Chat GPT to produce work that they're handing in and passing off as their own is extraordinary. And the implications of this are staggering. If we let this go unfettered, which there's a huge debate on my campus as well as campuses around the world,
Mm.
what do we do about this? Um, but my opinion, and I'm part of a group called Educating Without AI on the campus. My particular opinion is there's a very good chance that 20 years from now, the next generation is going to be people who are not really capable of writing.
Yeah.
Um, or their writing is going to be like third grade level
Right.
compared to a college graduate today. They're using it to studies. Like we had Cliff Notes when we were in college. This stuff is like Cliff Notes on steroids.
Yeah.
It'll read you like a 2-minute synopsis that tells you everything. Then it'll actually write your 5-page
Yeah.
paper. And
Yeah, I had a guest on. In fact, my last guest, and we talked about this quite a bit, and he made some really good points, which I, because I was trying to play devil's advocate, like, well, because I'm a technology guy, I'm like, this is just another thing we all have to adapt, and and he was kind of like, not really, this is different, and so it got me thinking. One of the things he said, because I think I made the case that, well, okay, just like we used to have libraries, right? I mean, if you go back 500 years, you had to go to find some document to think about something and you have to read it. And then you have to go find another document, a book, go to a library. And then when I grew up, you had to go to the
sure,
card catalog and go to a library and get
right,
5 books, check them
same,
out and
yeah,
read. Okay. But then
yeah,
Google came along. Now I can search for stuff. And it's just like I immediately went to the library and all those books were just summarized or, were the books were all put in my virtual lap really quickly. So I didn't have to physically go anywhere. And I
right,
said, but and I said, and then so I said, isn't AI just that next step? Like, where's that divide? And he made a really good point,
hmm
which was, if you take the library example or the Google example, your brain, the human, you still had to do the synthesizing of the information. You had it all in front of you, but
yeah,
you had to ingest it all, synthesize
yeah,
it, and then make sense, put it in your own language, put it in your own words, and then put some writing on paper after you've synthesized the points that you've gained from
hmm
reading all that information. The the step function here is now AI is not only doing the gathering of the information, but it's also doing the synthesizing and giving you the output. So
yes,
your entire
and
brain,
the production,
right? So I was fascinated with the conversation because I just reached a point like, oh, so that is different. That's skipping a whole cognitive step that we don't have to do
yeah,
anymore. And if we just continue on that way, isn't that part of our brain will atrophy? Like, and if you don't use it, and to your point, writing, cognitive, just that cognitive synthesis of thinking independently, all that's going to atrophy. I mean, and
yeah,
so yeah, I think it is something to be concerned with for sure. But I guess I'm kind of split between it's going to be amazing for a lot of things, but I think the social impacts are going to be negative. I really do. I just think that's just like
yeah,
social media and technology. The internet is an amazing thing. I mean, the entire world. Imagine the world without the internet. But also, it created a society of everyone's connected but more disconnected than ever, and all the negatives of that. So
yeah,
I'm guessing it's going to be one of those. But the other difference is this is the first time we've ever had technology that builds itself. We've never really
yeah,
had that kind of thing. So that's a little, I mean, you can get into the dystopian thing, and which I am a bit concerned about. There's already been data leaks and things where AI agents running around doing things that,
yeah.
but anyway, that I don't want to go down this dystopian rabbit hole, but it just, going back to the education system, it's interesting because I did want to ask you that at the university, you guys must be struggling with that. What do we do here? And it's,
Oh, yeah, it's a huge
yeah.
discussion, and it's surprising to me how controversial it is. Like, and I guess this is, people tend to be egocentric. We tend to think, oh, that person looks like me, they probably think like me too.
Mm-hmm.
And we're surprised when someone thinks exactly the opposite of ourselves. That's pretty standard
Yeah. I
social
felt that before for
psychology.
sure.
Yeah, so this is one of these where I'm reading, we had like this campus-wide listserv and people, they're professors, so they're like 8 paragraph, works of art that people are writing to try to argue
Yeah.
against each other. And the number of people who are arguing for the benefits of AI in education is much higher than I would have guessed. I teach 2 writing intensive classes, and I have since 2000. So I pride myself on working really hard with students to go over drafts and go over revisions and see them 2 or 3 classes later,
Mm,
and then see them when they graduate and they write their letter of application for graduate school, and they're like, now you're a good writer.
right.
You
Yeah.
weren't when you were 18, but
Mm,
that's what you've developed. And in my writing intensive classes the last 2 years, especially the online ones. The in-person ones are a little bit different because they get to know you. You look them in the eye. You
yeah.
explain the adverse consequences of AI. It's less of an issue, but in online classes where they never know you, you're just like, you might as well be a bot. I had one class where almost every single assignment had the same exact headings, the same, like
You could tell they
word
didn't
for
even try
word,
to
the same exact.
reformat the output of the AI. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't, and it was not appropriate to the assignment, and it was like, and everyone was doing it, and
Yeah.
I, yeah, it's very obvious. That's part of it, right? At least at this point in time, and then I'm like, look, you spent 1 second doing this, as a quote, doing this assignment. I'm not going to spend any more time grading this
Mm,
assignment, so it becomes it's so professors who pride themselves on teaching writing and other creative endeavors, I think, are really running into more problems with this than people that are in other fields where that's
yeah.
less part of the
Because I
education.
do feel like this. I don't know where things are going to end up, but there's maybe a bifurcation between, if the knowledge you're learning is just to get something done, like say it's like we don't have to do 472 divided by 8.7 anymore in our heads. There was a time when there was
Right.
people, they were called calculators before the actual physics, right?
Mm,
There were people that would do it, real smart people. And then we had the little device called calculator and other computers. So we don't do that anymore. And we
right.
don't feel like we need to. It's sad to think, but is writing going to perhaps get there where we don't need to write anymore? Unless it's
I
for more of
know.
a creative endeavor, like, hey, I want to write a poem because it's the art of it,
Right.
but I don't need to write for my job, or the economy's not going to revolve around writing skills. So, just like I can get hired as,
Right.
as a job and I don't have to have amazing math skills because we have computers. Like maybe it becomes something like that where the arts are more preserved because of their just the nature of them, and it's an outlet and it's something, and the other, and maybe it bifurcates between the art and the, okay, now I have to have this knowledge work to make money and be part of the economy, which maybe that could be all automated with AI. But the other thing is, you know
Right.
I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about. I mean, Elon says, what is he calling it? He's predicting universal high income, where everything's going to be so, abundant with the efficiency of AI and machines, that money's not going to, everyone's going to have enough money and everything's going to be so cheap. Labor is going to be so inexpensive. And
Mm,
who knows? I don't know. But,
yeah.
but,
Well, let's hope he's right on that one.
yeah. So, oh, but interesting. But, I mean, so you look at
Yeah.
everything through an evolutionary lens. Are you generally, in this world, I would think if I were you, I would just be looking around going, man, we are so far from what we've evolved
Yeah.
to be. And are you having that nonstop?
Definitely, because there's the increase in technology. If you look at it as a mathematical function, it is
Oh,
steep.
it's, yeah.
It is, it's so straight up. And biological evolutionary change, like change in the human genome based on natural selection, takes thousands of generations for like
Right.
one change. Um, I read recently, now I'm not sure if this has been updated, but as recently as a few years ago, there had been 3 documented changes to the human genome since the advent of agriculture that have been documented. The main one being lactose
Mm,
tolerance. So, you know, it's interesting. We use the phrase lactose intolerance as if that's some kind of disease or there's something the matter with you. But if you kind of think about what that means, like lactose, like some human had to be the first person to ever drink cow's milk. I mean, was that a dare? Was
Yeah,
that,
that's right.
you know, like something from like the show
Yeah,
Jackass? I
yeah,
mean,
that's a good point.
that had you know, so I'm sure that there was probably famine involved, and it might have been to feed babies that were starving.
Mm.
You can imagine different scenarios, but that happened primarily in Northern Europe, and what you see in descendants of people whose ancestors come from Northern Europe, there's a variant of a specific gene that makes it that they can process cow's milk, and you people whose ancestors don't go back to that same lineage tend to have problems digesting milk. And again, to see that as a medical problem really misses the point. Um,
Yeah,
you,
the irony there is also funny too. And I saw someone had a shirt on. It was one of these protesters. I was out in San Diego for work, and there's some loony stuff going on. But anyway, it was not your mother, not your milk, and
mm,
it was a. I mean, they were all a little kooky and a lot of the stuff they were standing for, in my opinion. But it got me thinking.
mm,
I'm like, actually, that's a good point. When would we ever find another species and take the food it produces for its babies and say, I want that and drink it? It's kind of a little bit weird,
yeah,
you know, and you
absolutely,
can't imagine like, oh, our
absolutely.
bodies aren't made to break it down. Well, yeah, we wasn't intended to.
Exactly, exactly. And so the way natural selection works, you know, to really think about vividly what must have happened was babies that couldn't drink that milk or that got sick from it or weren't able to take it and there wasn't enough food ended
They
up
died, yeah.
dying out. Like that's how natural selection works. There had to have been a lot of death, and the people that survived were the ones that had that genetic variant and then
Yeah,
survive. And now a lot of us can drink milk and eat ice cream and whatever
right,
now as a result. But it had to have had a really ugly side at the time, given how natural selection
right. And it's
works.
funny. I was having this conversation with a buddy the other day too. It's like the other irony is now it's 2026, and we don't let natural selection do its thing, right? Like when people get
Hmm.
sick or they have some maladaptation, we don't let them die, right? And like I'm not saying we
Hmm.
should, but so all the bad genes just continue because we don't allow we're not allowing nature to do its thing, so we're hacking that, and then we have all
It's
these.
really
You know
interesting.
what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I'm not saying we just let people die, but it used to be where if you were slow and weak, you got eaten. Now slow and weak,
It's
we can just there's all machines to keep you alive and all that stuff. It's just an interesting way to look
and
at it. But I imagine it's like you must think like that. Um, but well, Glenn, I think we're pretty much at time. So you're anything else? You said your other book is almost done, so that's going to be published
Yeah,
when you
so the
think?
Oxford Handbook
Yeah.
of Evolutionary Psychology, we're just about handing it to the publisher. That should probably hit the shelves maybe in early 27, I would imagine.
Okay.
The book I wrote with a former student, Nicole Wedberg, called Positive Evolutionary Psychology, Darwin's Guide to Living a Richer
Mm,
Life. That's the one that really deep dives into a lot of these issues. So if any listeners are interested in
interesting.
these issues and learning
And that's
more,
on
like that
Amazon. I
entire
think I saw that on Amazon. Is that the one?
yeah, that one's on Amazon. Yeah, published by Oxford University Press.
Oh, very cool.
So if anyone's interested in way intense details on this stuff,
Yeah.
we
Well, that's why I
provide a
do like
lot of it
Psychology
there.
Today because it does a great job of having you all. I don't know if they edit it, but bring it up a level to its. You don't have to have the PhD. They just convey the key points, and it's really digestible. And I love the level. I'm a layman in this world, so it's just
Hmm.
a good place to understand the work without going too deep.
Yeah, I agree. I think they do a really good job.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It was a long time in the coming. I had a lot of fun. Any other marathons coming up or any other races or what?
Oh gosh, my son lives in New York City, and this is informal, but I'm so excited. He and I are both so excited about it. He lives in Lower East
Mm.
Side, and we mapped out from his apartment to Coney Island is exactly 13 miles.
Oh, you could do
So
it
he
out
and
and
I, when it
back.
gets a little warmer, we're gonna, and he's graduating college this semester too. So as like
Oh,
a
very
as
cool.
like a thumbs up to that, we're gonna do our own personal half marathon and just jump right in the
Oh,
ocean.
really? Very cool. Very cool. What is he? What did he? Was he studying?
Oh my God, this kid, Andrew is a vocal performance major at the new
Hmm.
school, and he's the front man of a amazing funk jazz band
Really?
called
Oh,
Mensch.
I'm a drummer. I
Yeah.
love jazz and funk and that kind of stuff. Oh,
It's fun
yes.
music.
It's so
I
fun
was
to
never so
play
into
too as a
it.
drummer. Oh,
Yeah.
it is just, it's
Yeah.
fun to listen to, but playing is, oh, it is. I got goosebumps just hearing you say that. Oh, that's so exciting.
Mm,
Good for him.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much, man.
Well, well, Glenn, I appreciate your time. I will send you a note, an email when I publish this, and we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Vinny, great
You
meeting
as
you,
well.
and thanks for having me on
I
the
enjoyed
show.
the conversation. Thanks, Glenn.